Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Monday Morning Meeting. I am Wilson Cole, president of Adams, Evans, and Ross and Backdoor Hiring Solutions. I am with our in-house staff general counsel attorney and my lovely daughter.
How many different titles will combine into one?
Well, this is true. This is true. Aware of many hats. But in this series of the Monday Morning Meeting, we have been going through the top 9 excuses in my riveting book, Backdoor Hires. It also gives you case studies. And Samantha and I have also, if you send us an email, we'll send you a link to it, have done a webinar on where we cover a little bit of these excuses, but we also go into more detail on the industry that's most likely to be backdoor hired in the positions that are most likely to be backdoor hired. Send Wilson at aercollections.com an email, and I'll make sure that you get a link. It's a free website or it's a free webinar for the industry. But we are going to wrap up number 7, 8, and 9 excuses. And they're all, 2 of them are especially cousins to each other, but 2 of them are somewhat related. But so I may kind of marry them together because we hear one enough on one specific one that we thought that it warranted its own excuse, but the fallback is really the same, or the excuse is the same. So number 7 and 8 is, number 7 is we did not hire them as an employee. We know this is when your clients get backdoor hired. The number 9 or 7 and 8 excuse for the reason they backdoor hire you is we did not hire them as an employee. We hired them as a consultant, or we hired them for another position. Now, in some cases, and this is another reason why I kind of broke it up, but they say, well, we hired them for another position. Sometimes there can just be confusion where they're unsophisticated. They truly didn't know. In other cases, they're just trying to bypass your agreement. The consultant thing, what I always find is when there seems to be more intent on trying to bypass of, oh, they're not an employee, they're a 1099, or they're not even an employee, we're just paying them a retainer. I can tell you, whenever you hear either one of those arguments, the debtor has just told you, I'm not going to pay you because. And so they think that they have a legal argument, maybe even depending on how the contract, and I'll let Sam cover that, how the contract is covered, they may have a legal argument, but that instantly should tell you that you're dealing with somebody that is full bore trying to get out of your fee. That's probably 20% of the backdoor hires that come in here. We hear that argument. Very simple way, in my opinion, if you protect yourself on the front side and get a signed agreement, very simple way to protect yourself against those 2 claims. But Samantha, on those 2 claims, from a legal standpoint, what's the argument and what's the theory?
Well, I think, if your contract says that it's for sales manager of specific city and they hire them for a different city, you've got a problem. So that's why I always love to see for any position and hired in any capacity. Because then that extends to if they're an employee, if they're 1099, I can get around it. There have been times, well, we hired them, but they're technically not our employee. And I go through and I usually start spewing out labor law rules of, well, do you direct when they have to be in the office? Do you handle their vacation time? And go along those lines. And that usually points out to them that, okay, we've got a problem. There's also a third sibling that kind of sneaks in. And that is, but we're not compensating them at X rate. Or we're not compensating them with cash. It's just, they don't have a salary. They're straight commission. And that's when I have to start going, okay, but, or I love stock options. They're only getting stock options, or more than 50% stock options. So we don't know. Well, no, that has a value. So I need to see, I start asking for copies of what the stock's worth, because if it's not a publicly traded company, we have no idea to go and look and see what the stock is worth. And then adding that in with, okay, then what are they working? Because there will be this many hours or that many hours, and they try to create a nightmare on it that there are ways to get around it. But if they start saying things along the lines of either, well, we didn't hire them as a full-time employee, and then they start going into the compensation, again, they're telling you why they're not paying you.
Yes.
And so I think the big main protections are have it in there of any position and in any capacity.
You know, in any compensation or total compensation is something that I like to see. But if you've been following this particular series, or if you've read my book, or if you've gotten the free reports, there's almost a general theme, even though the excuses are different. There's a general theme of get a contract signed, because those contracts, you know, a lot of people say, well, you don't have to have a signed contract to be a valid agreement, let's say in the state of Florida or state of Georgia or whatever the case may be. And to a degree, that's 100% absolutely true. But then you get into the nuances of what exactly was covered in this agreement, and that is why you want the agreement that covers the compensation, that covers for any capacity in any position or any ability. Because I can tell you, half of the agreements or half of the arguments that we get is even if there is a signed agreement, where they say, well, when you hire them as an employee, and if you use the term employee, the counterpart to Samantha is going to seize on that and start reading us back the same thing that she's reading to support our case is, well, here's what it says an employee is. And so just any capacity. The final and ninth reason is, and in this one, this is a little difficult, because you may have somebody that it's not a character issue. It's one of those few excuses to where if you look at it from a different angle, they may have a point, but it also comes down to what the agreement was that they signed. So the number 9 reason was, yes, we hired them, but the other candidate that you supplied to us fell off, so we're taking this one as a credit. Now, we run into this probably about 10% of the time. Now, Samantha, you know, it's a scenario. I don't know how many of these have hit your desk. It seems like I get these, but you know, our client placed somebody 6 months ago. They're looking for somebody else, totally separate position. All of a sudden, that other person falls off, and they say, well, we're just going to take this credit.
Well, for me, why I'm kind of smirking is the ones that hit my desk are always my favorite, of where they do that, but the 2 candidates were working there at the same time.
Good point. And
my argument there is, you cannot call, you know, candidate B a replacement for candidate A when they were working there consecutively.
Okay. Good point. So
that's usually my big rule of thumb of when anybody comes in and, well, the other candidate didn't work out, so we're using a credit. And it's like, hold on, wait, when were people hired?
Yeah. Okay.
And also, you run into where they never paid, they may have never paid for both.
True.
And they're wanting to argue credits. Well, if you never, or you have an A, B, and C situation.
Okay.
And if they start saying, well, I paid for this one and this one didn't last, so this one's a replacement for, one, it gets complicated in trying to distinguish the contract. But 2, if they never paid for whatever position they're trying to claim a replacement or a credit for, that guarantee was usually void to begin with.
Sure. So from a general overview in a contract, then basically having some type of wording that we will guarantee for that specific position if they don't work out. And this
or for specific candidates.
Or a specific candidate.
Because you don't want to get into specific position, because then they try to loop it up to the front of the contract.
No, that's a good point.
That it was only for. So I like to see, you know, replacements will be only for that, to replace the candidate that leaves.
The other thing also is, and I know we've done some podcasts on this, is if you bring in some type of prorated garbage where you have to give money back if they don't work out, that takes that number 9 excuse and gives them all kind of ammunition to fire back at us. So if you have some type of money back guarantee versus replacement guarantee, Number 9, in my opinion, is going to be a problem because.
Well, and even something that I'm running into is if you have a 30, 60, 90 payment,
Okay.
but have a replacement only in a 90-day replacement only guarantee.
Yep.
I'm running into issues if they leave at 45 days and they're not wanting to pay. They've paid the first $5,000, but they're not wanting to pay 10 and 15.
Okay.
So I understand the breaking it into payments, but also know that it becomes much harder to enforce that 90-day replacement only guarantee
Where you still have
when
money.
payments are still outstanding.
Yeah. So, if you extend out terms, there needs to be some type of wording that payment is due or their guarantee is void. And the only remedy, in my opinion, the only remedy they have is replacement. But there again, if it's at 30, 60, 90, from a practical standpoint, if you're giving them 30-day terms and they void the guarantee if they don't pay, they void the guarantee of replacement and they still owe the fee. So that wraps up the last 3 excuses for backdoor hires.
And I'm going to throw in one little kind of plug on an excuse. If you are hearing that if they are not willing to sign the contract because they don't have a scanner, printers down, things like that, look into some sort of digital signature.
Yeah, like a DocuSign or something.
Yeah, PandaDoc, something. It's roughly $40 a month, and everybody can sign it from their phone.
Yes. Okay.
And that's something, I was just at a conference speaking, to a group, and we were having large discussions about the significant change that people who have implemented digital signatures into their contracts, how many more contracts they're now getting back signed.
Okay. Well, that's a good point. And so if technology has gone to the point to where I don't want to have to do a scanner or things on those lines, it may be time to move on to a digital agreement. So that is a very good point on that, Samantha. Thanks for that interjection, because on all of these things, and I can tell you with any backdoor hire, we're still probably be able to get it collected statistically if you don't have a signed contract. But I can tell you across the board, we're able to get about 40% more revenue for you when there's a signed contract. So by not getting a signed contract on any of those excuses cost you roughly 40% of the maximum that we or anyone should be able to get you, just on average. So make sure you get a signed contract. If you hear, I'm not going to pay you because, then whether you get us involved, your local attorney involved, go ahead and at that point escalate. And Sam, I appreciate you joining me on the top 9 excuses, and I will see you next week when we'll cover another subject.
Sounds great.